Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us today to our May webinar. So today I have with me Matt Larrabee. He is our Director of Web Services, and Andrew Seller, who is our Associate Web Design Director. And myself, I'll be acting as the host for today. I'm Emma. I'm the Marketing Specialist here at Panos. So today we're going to be talking about all things websites, whether you're planning a redesign, reviewing your site's performance, or maybe deciding where to invest in next. Today, we're going to aim to walk you through how to align with your website's features with your business priorities, from must-have tools like online account opening, search functionality, to value adds like personalization and chat support. And we'll explore what makes sense for your institution and, more importantly, what doesn't. So to kick things off, what features, design elements, and CMS platforms are best suited to meet the unique needs of your financial institution?
I think I'll get started on this one. I kind of thought about this and wanted to approach it in a way that as we work with clients, what are some of the things that when we present to them that they really kind of struggle with deciding on, going back and forth. And kind of when that process starts, you really have to start thinking about how you want people using your site. Of course, you always want them to, you want to have conversions, but kind of at a different level, how do you want them to use your site? And so a couple examples are the patterns you use, how you arrange stuff on a page, and taking that right to kind of a product level, your accounts, something of that nature. What kind of page do you have? It's built on, it kind of follows, how do you want to talk about your products? Do you want all your products on one page? That's something we would call a multi-product page. But when you do that, that's a lot of stuff on one page. And so you have to kind of consider, if I want all of our accounts on one page, then I might not want to have too much content or info about those, because then the page can become very big and tiresome. But on the other hand, if you want to have time to spend talking about your products, then you would do standalone pages where ultimately at the end of a journey, a user ends up on a page dedicated to that product. And some benefits there are now you have opportunities to include additional content on a page like that that might tie into the product, like a blog feed or resources that might apply specifically to that product. You could even consider only having a comparison chart on your site, the good old reliable comparison chart. And even with those, they serve their purpose sometimes in tandem with these other kinds of blocks and patterns. But, do you want a comparison chart that's very easy to look at, or do you want everything about all your products inside the comparison chart? And so kind of moving on from that, another kind of feature and element to think about is your navigation. Not just your nav there at the top of your site, but your drop-down menus. There's so many ways we can approach those these days, and there's good ways and there's bad ways, but it kind of boils down into preference. And again, thinking about how do you want people navigating your site? There's something like a mega drop-down where when you open it, I kind of see your whole child parent pages, your whole category pages laid out. That can be nice. That's the quickest route to get somebody to a specific product page. There it is, but they got to spend time in that menu looking at it, and that's kind of where they're doing their exploring. Or do you want to do a more simple menu where you just list out the highest level stuff, and then a user starts going through your site, and at that point you design those pages and you use patterns to get them where they need to go, but you're getting more opportunity to inform. And then one other feature I kind of wanted to touch on that could be nice to think about is a home branch in your navigation. And what essentially that is a user being able to set a location as their home branch. And this can be beneficial for kind of a lot of features. If you have rates on your site, this can be great, especially if you have rates that change in different areas. A user can set a home branch, they get all the rates just for them without having to do any extra steps. And this kind of even rolls into some personalization, but I think Matt would be much better equipped to speak about that than me.
Yeah, sure. And generally, a rule of thumb for features on your website is that a feature should always meet a need of a customer. So that's what you should think of first when you're looking at features of your website. Make sure that they're meeting the needs of your customer. There are definitely some base needs that all customers have: security, compliance, ADA compliance, things like that. Really, those should be top-notch for all websites. Ease of use. But then there's definitely some specific to each financial institution. Like Andrew said, personalization. Most FIs have very diverse demographics, a lot of different cultures, a lot of different areas that they serve. Personalization is a great way to target different groups and different cultures in different places when you have those very distinct demographics. So that's definitely a feature to look at. when you're not just serving really a very typical demographic. Most FIs are going to have 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 90-year-olds. They're going to have people in rural communities and urban communities. So personalization is a great way to address that. Also, things like using smart searches. So things that are more like ChatGPT or Google now when you search that answer direct questions. So this is great when you have a lot of information on your site, when you notice that your customer support center is answering a lot of questions, when you're doing conversions, things like that, where customers are really looking for information. A smart search can really take all the information on your site and allow the customer to ask a direct question and group the answer and answer the question directly on your site. So that's another feature that works well for FIs that really have a lot of information and need to answer a lot of questions. But you should also look at things like integration. So if you have a CRM or different automation tools or core banking system, making sure that the site that you build is going to integrate well into those and really support those well.
Awesome. Thank you both. And I think that that's a good segue into the next question, which is how can you ensure that your CMS investment is aligned with your goals? So considering things like prioritizing capabilities over the platform prestige.
Yeah, no, this is an important one. So CMSs really can be divided into a few different groups. So your basic CMS, I would say, is the group that has WordPress in it, has Drupal, has Umbraco, really those more open source ones, great for building a website, great for doing a lot of simple marketing, things like that. And then the other group that you have are the more digital enterprise systems, ones like Sitefinity and Kentico, and even if you go beyond that, like Sitecore, some of those larger ones, or Adobe. So really, you're going to pay a premium for those things in those more advanced systems. So the first thing you want to do is really define what your needs are. It's easy to get, in our industry, we call it shiny object syndrome, where you see these features of these very robust systems. They are great features. A lot of people don't use them, and you're going to be spending a lot of money on features that you don't use. So really the first thing you should do is really have a great idea of your needs and what you're looking to do in the next few years. It's called a needs assessment. So that's evaluating your internal capabilities, what you have for staff that's able to do these things, the integrations that you might have to support, and your must-haves over your nice-to-haves. That's really the first thing. And then you should look at total cost of ownership too. So if you're budget conscious, there's going to be budget concerns with all these different platforms. Some take more to develop on, some have more maintenance down the road, some have a license fee and upfront costs. So it's really important to really look at all those factors when you're deciding something that's cheap today might be more expensive down the road, or vice versa. So that's one great thing to look at as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very important decision, and there's definitely a lot to consider. Moving along, what role does your website play in promoting brand presence and driving user conversions through the sales funnel?
I believe the brand presence has a lot to do with that. Anyone who is on this webinar has probably heard in this industry, if you've been in it long enough of any kind, your brand is not just your logo, it's not your color, anything of that. I mean, really, your brand is what do people think about you? What do they remember about you? What was the experience they had when they were in your lobby? And on a website, you don't necessarily have that human interaction face to face that you can kind of get. And so I really like to talk to our clients about thinking about your site in some ways over what makes you bigger and better, or what makes you better than the bigger FIs like Bank of America. I'm going to pick on them because I have a bad history with them, and I hope no one from Bank of America is on here. But when you kind of look at those big ones, you have to find your niche to promote your brand, because that is how you're going to be able to stand out against some of them. Because at the end of the day, your competitors, Bank of America, you all have checking accounts at the end of the day. And so some things that I like to discuss with clients to really reinforce your brand is like resources and education. And you can find that on most FI sites, but that's something you can prioritize at your level. It can be more like a seed that you plant, depending on where you put it on your site, wherever you have content that leans into that. Again, putting them on product pages. Once I've looked at the product, here's some blocks that give me resources to learn more about that, or link in with some blogs to educate myself some more on that. Showing that you're investing in that, whether that's through your time or a partner like Bonsai, but showing that you've invested in that means you're being more than just a destination to come and open an account. You're trying to be a resource for those people. Maybe the easiest thing is testimonials. They're great. I would think that most of us would agree that when we look at anything, when we're on Amazon and we're looking at a product, we always check out the testimonials. We don't know these people. Maybe they were made by bots, but we still put a lot of weight in testimonials. And so, not being afraid of those, sometimes you might be concerned that I need to have really great ones, or I need to have an image of the person. But there's lots of ways around that, whether you have images of people or not. Just using those strategically throughout your site can always kind of show that you're providing a great service and you want to put that front and center because here's what people are saying. I think next to testimonials, the biggest and easiest thing is focus on community. That's, I think, the biggest advantage that you have as a medium-sized, smaller-sized FI is what you do in the community. I know personally that's what I looked at when I switched banks from the aforementioned evil Bank of America. Was I would notice I kind of liked knowing a little bit more where my money was going. What was it doing? What are you doing in the community? And nothing gets more personal than that. Nothing reinforces your brand more than how you interact in the community and having that content on your site for the users who want to dig into it. One little thing you can even think about: photography. Stock photography is a great resource. We're glad it's there. It fills in a lot of needs. But anytime you find yourself putting photography on your site, you know, photography tells a story without words. And so when you have custom photography, pictures you've taken at your own events, things like that, that can really help kind of funnel into that as well, of just reinforcing, what kind of place you are. And then I kind of wanted to wrap up this whole thought of like all those things I mentioned. Something I really like to talk about too is putting it on your homepage. There's a whole other webinar about your homepage we could do, and a lot of the thought and patterns that go into that. But any of those things I mentioned, having that on your homepage can be a really great way to start establishing your brand, because the people going down your homepage are new people for the first time. And so they will dig into your site to learn about your checking account when they're ready. But if it's on your homepage, talking about who you are through all these things can be a really good benefit to start introducing yourself and your brand right out the door.
Yeah, and we even did some research, a couple of banks, and found that for the ones we researched, 700% more new customers went to the website than all their branches combined. So definitely that's the first point of contact for your brand for most people out there. That's the first impression that they're going to get. And even talking about the funnel, that's where data comes in. You can't have a funnel without data. So very important to be able to track all that, to be able to track that the updates that you're making, the community stuff you're adding is actually paying dividends and you're moving people along that funnel. So it's great to have that. We know from experience and from data that we have that works well, especially for new customers, having that kind of content. But to be able to prove that and to be able to show that the work you're putting into it actually does move people down the funnel as well.
Absolutely, all really great points. So again, kind of just moving along, what are some of your organization's key strategic goals, and how can your website be leveraged to help achieve them?
Yeah, so it's definitely important to know your strategic goals up front. Just for instance, if growth is your goal as a FI, you should be optimizing your lead generation. You should be looking at SEO-friendly content and conversion landing pages and integration with CRMs and different things that's really going to push a user to make decisions and gain deposits. But there's a bunch of other strategic goals too. There's member engagement. That might be one of your key goals, where you're looking at personalized messaging, you're looking at community news and blog articles and resources. A lot of banks are looking for talent recruitment, where you really want to focus on your career benefits that you have, maybe dynamic content and testimonials or employee stories, and showing your culture as an FI. And then also things like operational efficiency, where you offer a lot of self-service tools like FAQs, AI chatbots, or online form submissions, online applications. just to reduce the call center volume that you have and really make things a lot easier for users to do online.
And then I guess back to you, Andrew, how can specific design elements act as strategic goals to drive conversions? And how might a visually rich, well-designed website support broader business objectives?
Of course, we're always looking at what is out there, not necessarily following trends, because not every trend is great, but we're always looking at sites that are in our industry and outside of our industry. And I think looking outside of your industry can be very important. If you find yourself you're getting ready to do a new website, look at any sites, see what you like about them. And one thing that we started doing a long time ago was we started looking at shopping sites, and we were thinking about how they lay out their pages and what elements were they using. And for example, your big call to action, you're put in my shopping cart, you're open an account. Where are those buttons? How strong are they on the page? How dominant are they? Don't ever make me look for it, regardless of where I'm at on your page. If I have a page with a lot of content, I'm far down, looking at the patterns of, do we want them to have to scroll back up? Preferably no. So always having CTAs be dominant in things of that nature, and even elements like your login, looking at other sites outside of FIs. Sometimes we get asked to put logins in very unique places, but when you think about most sites you go to that require any kind of login, it's usually hanging out in the upper right corner. So sometimes you don't want to necessarily just break the mold to be different. You want to lean into familiarity that your users already have. And another thing that I think not new, but always keep in mind is, again, when looking at shopping sites, those abilities to cross promote, cross sells, things of that nature. It's never a bad idea if somebody's exploring your site and they're learning about a product to let them know, hey, we also have this. And Matt kind of touched on it a little bit, but these are also times when personalization could come into play. By knowing what users have been looking at, you can actually promote things that might be more in their wheelhouse at that time. But the other kind of part of your question that I find to be very fun to talk about is kind of the visually rich part. I'm definitely a little biased as being the designer on here, but I really do think that people can see the difference between a template site that you just bought off the shelf and put some of your copy in there and put your logo up in the corner, or a site that was custom designed. And there's a visual argument to that and a kind of a structure there, but I feel like custom sites have a premium feel to them, and I think people notice that. And we have a designer here on staff, and his whole thing is leaning into just kind of fun little ornamentations and iconography and other things throughout the site that ultimately is there to just bring in some more interesting elements. They maybe don't serve any purpose, but those things give your site that more personality, and that usually ends up not coming through on template sites. So it's these little things that really, again, give them that personality. And then kind of from a structure standpoint, something you get when you're making a well-designed site is we can approach your content completely differently. And what I mean by that is, your checking page is doesn't, and it maybe shouldn't be the same as a mortgage page. Your checking accounts, it's about, let me see what you have, show me those options, does it have a good rate, just kind of give me those bullet points. A mortgage page might very well be someone's first mortgage, and there's a lot of questions that come with that. And so a mortgage page, while it eventually will of course talk about those products, those mortgages you offer, you rearrange those pages, you make blocks, you give a journey down that page. It might be different because you want to maybe lean more into informing. Sometimes lots of call to actions with the mortgage, get pre-approved, meet a lender. So building these pages kind of custom in that sense, we're able to look at the content and make sure that the page has kind of an appropriate journey for that user.
And I guess with that in mind, regardless of your budget, how should an FI's brand identity, geographic location, or audience inform the website's design and layout decisions?
I mean, kind of a lot of the stuff I talked about, you can kind of roll into this. I would say, though, always where you can, lean into what makes you stand out against your competition, or lean into your strengths. Again, could be resources and educations. Just find those things that maybe your competition doesn't do. Kind of looking at your competition's always good for a lot of reasons, but you could see where they're weak and you're strong. And your competition isn't always necessarily an FI. Like I mentioned, continue to always look at sites that you like, see how they are talking about themselves, see how they show their products and their services. It's built into you like so many people. You kind of know what's good and you kind of know what's bad because you walk away from, oh, I found what I needed quickly and the page was pleasant to look at, things of that nature. That's in you. And so you can look at those things and see what's working. Now I'm rambling, so Matt, please save me.
No, I mean, I think geographic sensitivity is a very important thing for community banks and credit unions. Really, we touched on it before, but like different communities behave differently. It's very important, I think, to highlight local branches, really make those location pages really robust. Andrew talked about the My Branch option that you might have on your homepage or throughout the site. Really identifying community initiatives. Really, you probably have services that are more unique to rural and urban as well at different locations, so spotlight those as well. And then even your demographics. We know that older users really need clarity and in contrast and a direct path to anything. Younger users are more experienced navigating around sites, but they expect really mobile optimization to be forefront. And we see that even in stats. It's a little different for community banks. Desktop is way higher viewage for community banks than the rest of any other industry. It's about 50-50% now that go to FI website on phone versus on desktop. So really you have to cater to all those people. And also one thing that's important budget conscious wise is really take note of the scalable design system. And what that means is how easy is it going to be to make new pages? How easy is it going to be to update content after the site is launched? We talked to many clients and many FIs that their biggest concern about their current website is they have to go to their agency or they have to go to somebody to make any simple update on the site. They can't do things for themselves. That's probably the number one complaint we get from prospects. So really make sure when you're speccing these things out that you really ask about the design system and what you'll be able to update after the site's launched. How easy will it be? If you can build new landing pages, if you can reorganize blocks, those types of things are going to save a lot of money in the long run as well.
Awesome. Well, I think we covered a lot of really great stuff today. Alrighty. Well, if anybody does come up with a question at any point, please feel free to reach out to myself or Matt or Andrew. You can find us at myself. I would be econlin, CONLIN at panosmarketing.com. Same goes for Matt and Andrew. And I guess the last question that we'll leave you with is, could you guys speak to maybe some key takeaways or some points that you've mentioned today that you'd like to reiterate again for the audience?
Yeah, I can go first. I think my key takeaway from this, maybe a couple, put your money in the right spot, plan for your biggest needs of your customers, avoid shiny object syndrome, especially when looking at a CMS or a website. Make sure it's addressing your highest needs and get help from trusted resources. If you don't know your biggest needs or you worried about missing some things, definitely Panos will help. I know there's a lot of resources out there for help with that to really get a good idea of what you need before you start this process.
The thing I would want to add is a line a colleague of mine always used, and I think it's a very strong point to keep in mind is always remember when you're going through a new website that it is for members and users. It's not really for you and your organization. And what we just mean by that is you can kind of fall into a trap of laying out things, how it might make sense to you in the industry or using words that make sense to you. But always kind of try and keep in mind, try to think about a site when you're making it. Like if I didn't know anything about this world, accounts or mortgages, anything of that, how would I want this information presented to me?
Absolutely. So, well, thanks again, you guys. One thing that I'll add that Matt had kind of mentioned earlier is just that, we really like to say that your website really is your busiest branch. And oftentimes you do just get one opportunity if someone is in the market looking for a new bank or a new credit union. And if that experience is negative, then automatically they're going to sort of count you out. So really think about what your strategic goals are, when you're thinking about redoing your website, and just kind of make sure that you do your due diligence and put in the same care and expertise that you might, when you're building one of your physical branches. I just want to thank everyone for joining us. This recording will be put up on our YouTube within the next couple of weeks, along with the website. And we certainly hope to see you next time.